trafficking, trafficking for prostitution, a lot of things, even though they're not identical to the allegations in this new second amended complaint, I think one of the points is that there's been this sort of public airing of all this, the charges, the criminal cases, and suddenly there's attention being paid to the idea of sex trafficking, of that sort of sexual abuse that came out in the Diddy trial. And coincidentally or not, suddenly some of these issues wind up in this new complaint. They hadn't been in the initial complaint. There had been allegations of sexual harassment, but this is really graphic, really vivid detail that we hadn't seen previously. And I think we have to ask ourselves, you know, again, not happening in a vacuum, it's following in time the Diddy trial and actually the Weinstein trial too. So what we're seeing is this very public series, this pattern of allegations being made. And these hadn't been made in the first complaint.
I was actually at the Diddy trial. I followed it every single day. And you're right. Immediately when I saw the sex trafficking edition, I thought of Diddy. There's no way that you can't, especially after this highly publicized trial. And so I'm wondering, in your opinion, plaintiff Lauren Pashota, did she add it because of the Diddy trial, that she thought, okay, other women came forward, saw the verdict, and then thought, okay, I'm going to tell my story too?
You know, it's certainly possible. We don't know. No one's said that publicly, but you can't separate the fact that this did happen subsequent in time to what we saw was weeks and weeks of testimony. And again, that was very vivid, disturbing testimony about victims talking about sex trafficking and all the abuse that was taking place. And now we're seeing the second complaint alleging things that are somewhat similar. I mean, the stuff that we're seeing in this complaint it's incredibly vivid, it's incredibly disturbing. And you have to raise the question, or at least ask, why wasn't it in the initial filing? Of course, you know, you're allowed to certainly amend things like that. But I think if I were looking at this objectively, I'd say that's some pretty interesting, horrifying stuff. And if it occurred prior to this filing of the second complaint, why didn't we see it before?
I do have to ask one more question about the whole Diddy thing, because the way that we saw the verdict come down, obviously it was split and he was convicted on transportation to engage in prostitution. But the two sex trafficking charges that he had, he was found not guilty on. And now all of a sudden we have these Kanye allegations. And I do want to again specify for our viewers, we're talking civil when it's Kanye or Ye, and it was criminal with Diddy and he's now been acquitted. But I don't know. I mean, doesn't that make it hard to prove? We just saw it in the Diddy case. Sex trafficking is hard to prove.
It's hard to prove. But again, you're right. The standard in a civil case, it's preponderance of the evidence. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. Generally, that means it's somewhat easier to prove in a civil trial in front of a jury, for example. But I think, you know, you have to ask the question, again, why was it in the initial pleading if it occurred? But is it part of the whole public consciousness of things like sex trafficking? And, you know, I think people learned a lot, even though there was an acquittal on those charges for Diddy. I think people who were watching the trial, who were following that, who maybe had not been familiar with that kind of criminal charge before or watched that process of the justice system, I think people learned a lot about it. I think you have to wonder, well, is this trying to tag team that happened in the Diddy case? Now that people's consciousness is raised, now that people have this education, did her lawyers think we better amend our complaint? And, you know, anyone can allege anything in a complaint. You've got to prove it up, of course, if you want to be successful. But it did follow in time this sort of public awareness of those kind of charges.
It's still a question mark, to your point. We don't know why she added these allegations now at this time. And again, over and over, it's civil. But let's talk about the allegations that she added, talking about an instance where he allegedly orally raped her, or there was a different instance where he kind of locked her in a plane, in a private room, in a private jet, and was masturbating in front of her. These are pretty serious allegations, I'm just going to say. However, are they tough to prove in a way in that they happened a while ago? We don't have DNA. There's probably no video or photo evidence, things like that.
Yeah, you know, it's going to depend on how they back this up. I mean, is there contemporaneous statements to her friends, to doctors, to therapists?
Sir, listen, he bragged about he bragged about being a pervert. He bragged about being a apist. He bragged about it. I mean, so what is it to prove?